10 to 15 minutes once their speaker arrives, but hope everything's going well. I think we got everything going on YouTube and Facebook, so we'll see you all in a bit.
go downstairs and figure out where to go next.
Yeah.
This is a really cool session idea. We can do this.
Yeah, we're trying to do more things that, you know, people are in the USO are under this. It's a good balance. So we're trying to do some like personality test type things. Resume building was an idea. Still a couple of really strong speakers. We got Western Carolina involved. So Western Carolina, like a college, university, and so we're gonna have some like high people there talking to me. And then we'll still be doing like the Failure Fridays, right? Which are neat. We have like the panel of people talk about their fail. Working on it.
Nice.
But yeah, we're trying to do like diverse events. So it will not last 3 hours. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I submitted my resume to be shared, or have them
Oh,
go over
did
it,
you?
and I was like, I'm nervous, but I'm comfortable sending it to like high people at businesses. I should let my peers.
Yeah, totally. I was, just applying for jobs not too long ago, and it's so hard to get resume help. There's so many scam sites, it's annoying.
I know, and then they act like they're gonna help you for free, and then they're like, okay, now it'll be $150, and you're like, I don't have no proof that's actually gonna be worth it.
No.
I went through the same thing.
And they tell you nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's just good having a trusted resource.
Yeah, I went through like the same process, so this will be cool. So this I think is one of like the career people at Western University, so
Oh, okay.
they like do this for a living.
Oh, that is.
So it will be very
awesome.
beneficial.
Hi,
So,
I'm a kid.
Nebula.
Lauren.
I'm so bad with names and not Nebula, and that's all it always gets me, because like mine's, people don't forget.
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
here, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so
You're lucky.
They said that you should say it out loud twice.
I try to spell it. I generally ask
Okay.
people how it's spelled, and then I'm like, helps
Okay,
me.
that's a good-
But that is a good trick. That's a good trick.
That's a good trick, because I've been doing it, say it out loud twice, and it
Yeah.
just doesn't help.
Yeah.
So. Do we need, does anyone here in the chamber lights off? Lights off.
There's somebody that helped us get some coffee, so if anyone wants some coffee, there's
Oh,
some
there is
coffee.
fresh coffee?
Yeah, I'm not sure how fresh, but it's from the chamber supply, so they helped us get that brewing this morning. So I put a picture in the store.
Coffee was brewed.
Really fresh in. Totally didn't have time to get coffee.
You never know these days.
Yeah.
Or I don't. So, I think Ted's, someone's here, I think the number probably,
Yeah.
but
I'm a kid.
Yeah, I just wanted to also, when I opened up the thing, the button,
yeah.
School. Yeah. Maybe like a little classroom kind of thing, one.
I did this thing that I was able to all these seats in the like sit there.
It's for that.
That's all right, might as well.
Well, that's the fun.
Well, Tiffany, imagine you get a meeting. It's official. Hasn't done that in a long time. Oh, and I kind of miss meetings all of a sudden.
I want to say Laura.
Yep.
What's your last name, Laura?
Berta,
Sorry?
Berta, it's spelled B-E-R.
Winbow. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
I need to.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry, I was just
that's
trying to,
okay.
when I multitasking my over and go, just kind of stay, just move on. I don't know, please excuse that.
Oh, you're fine. Take the seat.
I do not mind, you are allowed, there may be a charge for it later. I just get things going over here.
It is.
Okay.
There's like kind of balance if we can play around where everyone was hanging out and then professional ones and have some local. I don't know, it's not pretty good. Because everyone comes here asking, like, where do you go out? Where was it actually? They must have something. Like some artwork, local stuff, you know. But it's pretty cool. They did it. Or like it's good shape movement. But yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
There should be a pop-up shop there.
It's all in both places, like all the good books and stuff.
Okay, my live stream is
Yeah, my
up.
eyes are like,
Hey.
the password is Asheville 828 exclamation. That is capital. Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna ask that to read.
Yeah.
You get the two, it's okay, I'm gonna show up.
Okay, so pretty close there.
You got it, I'm absorbing.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
And so this was what I got, like from the other guy. What was he doing? Yeah, he got me out of the box on the egg one. I was like, dude, I was getting
Long story short, my
this
mom was
recipe, like, whatever you want to do. Like, I'm not gonna be picky at this point, it'll be better than it was. Let's start with up something right there.
There you go. So you have a couple options to set up. There is a thing where you can connect to Wi-Fi and just use your computer by connecting to like a shared computer setting.
Okay.
Or I can see if I can get the HDMI cable set up.
Well, I have thumb drive, which as long as Word is on here, I can do everything you can do.
What I do not do is where to plug in your CD. There's a USB port over here. I can see if that pulls up on the computer. I just have to switch to this.
I mean, I can put it on my computer.
I'll see if this will pop up. Sorry, when I get multitasking, I'll
That's fine.
it'll probably come up on this screen.
Okay.
Because this is the run PC.
Well, so none of that is there, so I'm just not putting it on, which is good. So, what's the left on my laptop? Yeah, I got left on my laptop.
Okay, so I will give the HDMI port.
I don't.
What a good.
For what? Yeah, right there. So I could put it on the flash drive if that's easier.
Whichever is faster for you, whichever makes you more comfortable.
It doesn't matter.
How about I just pop this out?
Okay. All right, yeah. It was sitting on my desktop here, and I meant to put it on that little drive. And
That's okay. Yeah. We're making things work. That's the best way to do things. Keeps Kelly on her toes.
Familiar. I just don't know if I can meet you at that one. So I think I've seen you before.
Yeah, that's a masquerade ball.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Expensive. They have the all you can choose doing, so I guess that's why. But there's no options. Yes.
I see resumes.
Yeah, that's it. It's the
Just
full
the
life,
resumes?
yeah, and then it's the free resumes.
Okay, so just open all three
Yeah,
of
just
them up.
open one and we'll start.
That one redacted. So whichever you want to start with.
Excellent.
I'll put this up here for you.
Okay, so I should I just talking to you.
If you don't mind, which I've got some view over there, okay, I see up there, and they're not here. So, I'll find my name. Questions, you want anything directly about it?
Did your colleague decide?
Yeah, she
Okay.
no.
I feel like most of the crowds are here.
So,
Hey guys.
thank you all for coming. Sorry about the little bit slowness here. We got everything all set up. We're going to be reviewing some important people like the chairman's resume. We can take some input for that. So we know about a roll for. We're going to be able to put them in that.
Maybe.
But Kelly here is going to introduce our speaker. We want to make sure to say thank you all for showing up. If you need coffee, there is some coffee in there. We were able to make some this morning, so feel free to take advantage of that. And we just want to make sure to thank you, Western Carolina, for making this connection to UNC Asheville with David here. Thank you for all of our sponsors. There's going to be a little kind of recap at the end, like some of the upcoming events. A little bit about that coming out in the future, what's going on with the professional development events. We got some speaking and some wonderful plans ahead. We're just going to work on our execution. We'll have some awesome things coming up for you. So take a look.
Welcome to a new year. Feels like a strange thing to say in July, but it is. It's a brand new YPA year. I'm Kelly McIntyre. I'm on our new YPA committee with the chamber to help connect folks at UNC Asheville and Western Carolina University, where I work. UNCA is my alma mater. To help connect folks from UNCA to our YPA community, try to bring you guys some content experts and practical advice and things that you can take away and use in your daily professional lives. David Earnhardt is our Associate Director of UNC Asheville's Career Center. That's where I've worked as a student, so I feel a lot of fondness in my heart for the Career Center at UNCA. And he's going to guide us in some tips, tricks, refreshing our resumes, and then also what to look for when we hire, which I think is something that we're all, if your work is anything like mine, we're trying to do a lot of hiring right now. So thank you so much for coming, and I'll let you take it away.
Awesome, thanks so much. Thank you all so much for being here and for coming to hang out with me at 8:30 in the morning on a Friday in the middle of the summer and the 4th of July week. I really appreciate that. My name is David Earnhardt. I'm the Associate Director for Employer Relations at UNC Asheville. So I work with employers to recruit on campus and help them find full-time and part-time and internships and graduate students and year service candidates and seasonal experiences, all kind of in one office and in one space. And so my role is to help employers find what they're looking for. And part of the work that we'll talk about today is employer feedback that I've gotten, and also some best practices that are based on some work that we do in our professional lives. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm sorry I'm a smidge late. I got behind every slow poke in Buncombe County. So I appreciate y'all being patient with me as we're getting things set up. So I have some examples to work from, but if y'all wouldn't mind just spinning through the room and let me know who you are and where you are in your professional lives and what brings you to the table today, just so that I can make sure that I'm gearing the presentation in the right way. So you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. I'm Erica Porch. I am currently a learning writing coach for Buncombe County Schools and the coordinator for accessibility and engagement at Clemson University. I'm here this morning because I haven't put my most recent accomplishments into my resume. It's first up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
I'm Lauren Berta. I'm a global marketing manager at Amazon. I'm here today because I was recently, it's a new job for me, so I was applying and realized that building out your resume is something you should always stay on top of. So, looking forward to this. Thank you.
Awesome.
I'm Brian Appleton. I'm in the process of starting my own business, so things go well. I won't ever show my resume to anybody ever again, but we'll be on the hiring side for sure. And so just like you stay on top of where things are going. Cool.
I'm Debbie Lindgren. A couple things. One, I think I met you, David. I was part of Wells Fargo's hiring group back when I worked there at EDCA. So I put that together finally. I submitted my resume. I was a little nervous to start, but I was like, hey, if I send this to like high people in an organization, I probably should at least share it with my peers. And like groupthink and like multiple eyes only can make it better, right? So I guess we'll get there. But I appreciate you, David. Looking forward to seeing how everyone critiques mine.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. I'm Michael Donovan. I worked with the federal government for my entire career. I went to grad school in physiology and then never really used my degree. So trying to pivot back to that and kind of network in this area around biotech, medicine, things like that. And so a lot of that in Western North Carolina, but I think that it's being a big fish in a small pond.
There you go.
But it's difficult kind of making a transition when your resume says this is done, but not what you can do. So trying to reflect that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I have taken some weird shifts and turns with the pandemic. So right now I'm a full-time pet sitter. So kind of trying to look how I can put some of the like weird gaps in my resume. I made mask chains for a good amount of time during the pandemic. So just like trying to make that appropriate and spruce it up so I can find something that I'm actually passionate about, where I want to like make a difference.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Jeremiah Robinson. I'm the entrepreneur resident for Mountain BizWorks. So I found myself hiring really some different boards and organizations.
Thank you.
I'm Christy Weiner. I submitted a resume as well. It's anonymous, but it's obvious.
I did block it out though.
I just be admitted now, it's fine. I have had the same job since I've progressed, but I've worked for the same company since I graduated college. And it's part of an industry that can be very unpredictable, and there's cycles and it can be volatile, and I don't know if I'm going to be laid off or if I'm going to be promoted. So I want to be prepared for if something happens so I can, maybe take a little bit of time off and jump right back into things. And I think that, I'm interested to see, because like I said, I've only worked for one company, so it's, I'm not going to reflect that well on my resume. Because I've been there for 6 years, but it's just one section.
Sure.
So
Makes
we'll
sense.
see.
Yeah. That's awesome. And if you don't mind telling us what the industry is, you might have to
It's solar energy and
Awesome.
renewables. It's the utility scale, commercial scale.
Yep.
So,
I understand why you call it silver.
I'm Kelly McIntyre. I have been in higher ed for 12 years. I just had my work anniversary actually. Probably about 15 years postgraduate in the workforce experience. Similar to other folks in the room, like you just realize, David and I were talking on the phone, I was like, wait a minute, 2 years has passed, and I have actually done things in those 2 years. What did I do? Oh gosh, and just trying to record all that and get that on my resume kind of got me thinking that probably other people are in the same boat. And then we are hiring for so many positions right now, and I get put on a lot of hiring committees. So again, just kind of making sure I know what to look for.
Sure. Awesome.
As of September, I'll have been working at the same location for 10 years. Under 2 different ownerships. Not that many people made the transition. So I'm kind of an oddball. I seem to have missed the millennial node of changing jobs every 18 months. So if someone knows my memo went, please feel free to forward it to me. But that'd be 10 years post-graduation from my graduate degree. But I also worked 2 years as a graduate assistant in the warehouse, and before that, my dad's way of spending time with me was to bring me to work and give me a spreadsheet and said, solve this, or a stack of sales and use tax pieces of paper and say, figure out whether we're compliant or not. So I've been around accounting, mainly in manufacturing and food production, before that for 6 or so years. So it looks really odd in my resume or on my LinkedIn about how long I've been working. Like, how long have you been alive? Yeah, that's what happens when you have a very work-oriented parent. You can kind of pull up these job things along the way. So just I also have a very vague job description. I do whatever I get away with to help the company do what it needs to do.
Sure.
And I play whatever role I need to. So it's hard to necessarily put that into a resume that says, what do you do? It's like, well, I'm Oz. I'm the curtain. So just, I do whatever needs to be
I
done.
think you should just give yourself that title when you're done with it. Just be like Oz, and then just the great and powerful with just turn your resume.
My boss approved pot stirrer as a subject.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing that. It does help me frame the conversation a little bit. And I do want to say there are going to be a couple of things in here that may or may not be relevant for everybody. And there might be some things that a one-on-one conversation might be equal or better than this presentation will be. So I'm happy for you to reach out to me separately if you want to sit down and we can actually craft your specific resume. I'm happy to do that to the best of my ability in this. So feel free to reach out to me afterward. I have a few handouts. I didn't know how many there's going to be. So at the end, if you'd like I have a resume guide, I have a cover letter guide, and an interviewing guide. So if you are interested in some of our guides, you're welcome to grab some of those as well. Cool. So the plan for this is I do not have a formal presentation. What my goal is for us to look at resumes and see what we see. And then I'll give you some kind of best practices on how to frame things based on the examples we have. Now, making mask change is going to be a very different set of skills, right? Than Oz the Great and Powerful, right? So we're going to be kind of toying with some things a little bit. I'm sorry to call you out on that.
No.
It is. But you know what that shows to me if I was interviewing you, it's initiative, it shows creativity, it shows problem solving, like all of these things that are soft skills that are really hard to demonstrate, but you did it, right? And so kind of how do you say that without saying it? Does that make sense? So we'll kind of toy around with some of that as well. So I have some examples, and let's kind of set the groundwork a little bit first. Resumes are not a listing of everything you've ever done. It's really tempting to think that they are, because you have to think back like, okay, so where was I 10 years ago? Where was I last week? Like, what was I doing? We recommend having a master resume that is everything you've ever done. But if you're applying to something, it needs to be very tailored and specific to what you're applying for. So an accounting resume is going to be very different than one that's in the federal government or one that's in medicine. So it's a little bit of a different practice area, and so that's where some of the really tailored specific things come into play. It is very tempting to also, that's the way to say it, copy and paste your job description into your resume, because it's like, well, this is what I do. It's already written. It's already bullet pointed. We're good. It's very tempting to do that, and at the same time, what that shows to someone who is recruiting is, well, this person hasn't really taken a lot of time with the resume. They don't really know what to say. And so it ends up kind of working against you to do it that way. So the three examples that I have didn't do either of those things. I just wanted to set some groundwork on that. The other thing on this too, no one's resume is perfect. So there's no such thing, and that is okay. And no one's resume is ever finished. So I'll go ahead and say that right now. I've been in career centers for 6.5 years. I've been in higher education for 13, and my resume still can use work. And so, and it's something that you kind of look at it again 6 years. I look at my resume 6 years ago, and it's like, wow, I totally would say that differently now. And so it's this iterative process of building a resume that you don't necessarily have to feel like this is the only one that I'm ever going to use and it's done. You want to kind of tailor it to who you're applying for. Make sense? Go for it. Yeah.
I hate to be the guy that asks the question.
Please do. That's why we're here.
Answered, but I know a lot of I've been just not shooting at resumes, but strategically applying to jobs for the last 6 months, and a lot of times I won't even I'm overqualified for the job, but won't even make it cut because the resume is just scanned electronically, right, for keywords and things. So I was just wondering if you're going to talk anything about that, and if you go through the resume, like because we're doing it as human beings, right? So that gets to that stage, but you don't even make the initial cut because of the buzzword.
So I can talk a little bit about that now, and then we can use that as an example. So what you're talking about is a piece of software that's going to scan your resume and look for specific keywords. And the great thing about that is the job description is going to tell you which keywords to use. And so what I would recommend doing is building your bullet points around around the keywords that are in that bullet point. So for example, if a lot of folks will just send one resume to all the jobs they're applying to and not really like use the language specific to that organization. And that's a lot of times with the software can weed out some of those pieces. So the tough thing is AI is looking at your resume first. The good news is it's going to tell you what the cheat codes are, and that is in the job description. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question about that. So, there's a lot of resume templates out there and, fancy options to choose from. Does it matter when the software is scanning? If it's a Word document, PDF, obviously the image, I assume, is not the right way to go. But yeah, I've seen advice that's like, don't put things in a text box.
So you're going to get a little bit of my personal bias, and you're also going to get a little bit of broadness to that answer.
I love it.
So AIs, the softwares that are used are very different and very specific based on how they were built. So what I recommend doing is not using a template at all. And the main reason why is it frustrates the crap out of me. A very personal thing, right? Because the more you play with it, the more there's going to be hidden formatting and boxes and moving parts that you're just going to be fighting more than actually doing some time on your resume. And anything that the template is going to do, if you like the way it looks, you can do yourself in about 10 minutes. So if you like how how it's laid out with the bullet points in this direction and this thing over here, you can do that with tab stops and with regular formatting that the AI isn't going to kick out. That makes sense. So I would recommend starting your resume with a blank document, and then if you like the way something looks, see if you can kind of duplicate that look. Because the rest of the template, the other thing about templates is anytime that there is a template, someone else has used it.
Sure.
And so if you're in an industry where everyone is using everyone has the same basic experience, then all your resumes end up looking the same. And that's where you kind of lose some of the point of the template, which was to make it look good and make it feel good, right? So I would recommend just
So I kind of made my own for that reason, because I found all the templates to be absolutely infuriating. But all mine is done with text boxes. And I had come across when I was drafting it that maybe that's not the best thing to do.
So if you're trying to get in as a PDF, then the text boxes won't matter because the formatting is embedded, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you are turning it as a Word document, then I have seen software that doesn't know how to read it, and so it just ends up being question marks all over your beautifully formatted, wonderful document. It's boxes and squiggly lines and emojis and all this different stuff because the software doesn't know how to interpret it. And so I would lay it in a PDF.
Cool.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome. Other questions before we get started? I love this. Please ask questions. The whole point of this is to dig in and find new ways to do it. This might work. No, it's fine. Oh. See, you just need somebody else to talk to. That's the problem. Yeah. Awesome. Of the three who volunteered, does anyone want to go first? Okay, awesome.
Can I preface it by saying, one, I didn't even mention I now work at a different bank, which I don't have on my resume. So I'm both on the hiring side and have to submit my resume to the higher up side. The other thing is I know I'm wordy, so it's one of the things I'm trying to figure out. I spent 30 minutes doing one word on this thing, and it's like that didn't change anything. So
totally fine.
yes.
My friend says strong action verbs. I'm like, what does that mean?
I repeat the same verb a lot.
Yeah.
So I might, after we finish this, add one more job and send it to you if you're willing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So since they came up, let's talk about action verbs for a second. Whenever you're writing your bullet points, your action verbs are how you actually start your bullet points. So achieved, built, directed, engaged, those are kind of what we used to lovingly call resume power words. And so you can actually Google that if you want to. You can Google resume action verbs, you can Google power words, and what it'll do is you just get gobs of lists of different words so that you don't end up repeating the same thing over and over and over again. You can use directed, and that ends up kind of showing a little bit of lack of creativity, maybe is the way that could be interpreted. And so I would encourage you to find new words if you can, even if it means the same thing. But we also might be able to find a way to combine bullet points so that your directed action verb can be built into the same bullet point. Yeah, two different things. All right, so I'm just going to scan real slow, and I'm curious what you all see.
I know from my experience with the resumes, I know Missouri code, special order, that trial.
I'm sorry, I heard, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would look at it, I'd see his area code,
Mhm.
your resume, and also check, see if you were going, I want to make the drive to south or Hendersonville.
Cool.
Those are the practical things I would do.
Yeah, okay.
What are your thoughts about putting personal contact information like your home address on a resume?
So what I see with this is 35 years ago, a trend 35 years ago. And the reason is because everything was mailed, okay? So you would get hired through the mail potentially, and so they would need to have that information as quick as they can, right? So now, because identity theft is a thing, I actually try to be a little bit more limited in the amount of information that I give, especially when it comes to my personal information or my references personal information. So I try to be as broad as I can. So in this case, Nebula, I would say Weaverville, North Carolina. Okay. And then your phone number is fine, your email is fine. If you have LinkedIn, that's helpful. So you can put that on the top of your information. So that would be my suggestion.
That's perfect. Yes, I'm in a very conservative industry, and I'll probably follow templates for accounting and banking. So this is good. And y'all don't be afraid of
I promise that was not my goal. I was actually
no, I meant everyone. You said way too much.
What about first person verbs like coordinates rather than coordinate? Because like you said, it almost sounds like it's copied from the job description. Like this person is expected to coordinate rather than coordinates.
Yep.
I don't know if that matters at all.
I did notice that as well. Yeah. Some of that is also you'll run into issues with verb tense, and so it'll be like if this is a current position, all of your verbs need to be in the active tense unless it was a project you finished. So completed, like that would be in the past tense, but everything else your action verbs. Yeah. But actually, I'll go ahead and tell you, you're in pretty good shape, man. All things are good. I know we're nitpicky, but the way that I think about resumes is in 4 stages. So 1 is a blank sheet of paper, 4 is absolutely ready to apply, and so you're at a 2.5, 3 right now. So I'm telling you that to not think that you are, to make you not think that you're. We're going to tear you up.
So I see, because I have to review resumes for our applicants and things like that, plus, our applicants to graduate programs, as well as applicants and jobs we're hiring for. But so for me, I see okay, you have progressively responsible experience. You've been in the workforce X number of years. Just in glancing at it, looks like there's enough information to know about what your experience is, but it's not like 1 page of what you do at Wells Fargo and nothing else.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The nitpicky thing that stands out to me is the top 2 are both the same employer.
Okay.
So you can probably combine those, and the job is the tasks, activities, as opposed to accomplishments. There's nothing measurable.
Yeah, I was going to talk about accomplishment statements in just a minute. So here's the thing: the education system taught us how to write for the entire time that we were in the education system. It's a very specific way of writing, right? Resumes. No one in the history of the world has ever popped out of the womb knowing how to write. Okay, and so it's a weird way of writing. It's a different way of doing things. And accomplishment statements is a part of that. So I definitely going to talk about that for sure. I'm just curious if there are other things that you've noticed.
My most current should have the most bullet points.
Okay.
Maybe. Or especially if it's most relevant to what I'm applying to, like banking is like now non-Wells Fargo job.
So you're in banking now?
I am.
Okay.
And so I don't know, like that Accenture down there was, okay, 6 months,
Mhm.
and it has 4 bullet points, which is the same as like 6 years at Wells Fargo. I feel like I should probably let that matter.
That's probably where the periods go.
I was gonna say.
To the time on there.
Oh,
That's
this.
that's what
Like
I
this
use.
time?
Yeah, I
That's what
mean.
you get when you build your hotel.
Yeah. If we were to pull this up, even in a PDF reader through Google, it would probably go wrong. So some formatting things that I noticed, and this is so here's the other thing about it. Everyone's opinion on resumes are slightly different. And so my opinion on your resume, this is your document, you need to have it the way that you like it, okay? But in my mind, what I see is this kind of really broad experience, which is work, which is great. And at the same time, you actually have an internship down here, and you have a supervision experience down here. You see what I mean? So in my mind, you could actually do, if you did want to combine your Wells Fargo experiences, which I like, what you could do is you could put promoted from credit analyst, July 2020, right? And then you can combine those two so that you have room to change this to banking experience. And then you can have another heading down here, which would be tax experience or accounting experience, or kind of however you want to frame that. And then, sorry.
Can you call it unrelevant or, okay, banking would probably be good, but then another section that says like others.
And so because we're talking about keywords earlier, one of the things that I would suggest is this be banking,
Okay.
this be tax or accounting experience, whichever you wanted to do. And then down here, because you were a supervisor, I would actually recommend supervision experience. You could actually put that as, and you might have, I'm sorry, I don't know if you actually, it doesn't say that you supervised anyone, it says you coordinated. Yeah, mentoring, guided. So, and candidly, depending on what you're applying for and where you're at, this might fall off your resume. So there are ways that you can kind of frame the structure of it that gives you some flexibility.
Also, like as a new job, I take off the supervisor name and having something to talk about. That's not necessarily.
Part of
Yeah,
your
not helping to the.
part of your cover letter too. Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yep. The other, was another point I was going to make. Okay, so let's change gears for a second. If I use the term accomplishment statement, does anyone know what I'm speaking of, talking about other than my guy in the back?
To me, it's like a project that I achieved or it solved I got.
There you go.
Outcome related.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ooh, and this is actually one of my questions was, like, I read sometimes you need to have like metrics and numbers in there, but for me, it like feels out of place when I put them in, but maybe that's because those belong in accomplishment statements.
Yes, so let me so when you're writing an accomplishment statement, what you want to do is answer the following 3 questions. And the first is, and this is also helpful for your resume or for your interviews as well. If you start thinking in this context, it makes it easier. The first is, what did you do? And so that is coordinating with relationship managers, credit teams, and senior management. That's what you did to monitor and grow credit portfolios of real estate, focus on relationships with new commercial bank. That's what you did, right? And that is where it parallels the job description, right? Because it talks about what you're gonna do in your job description. The second question that you want to answer is, how did you do it? A lot of times this is where you would talk about software that you used. You would talk about supervision skills that you utilized. Talk about interpersonal relationships, whatever it is that you did with that, whatever method you used. And then the third question is, what were your results? And so not every bullet point has to answer all 3 of those questions, but if you can answer those to the best of your ability inside of your bullet points, it helps, okay? So I'll take us through that exercise. What did you do? coordinated with the relationship managers, credit teams, and senior management to monitor credit and grow credit portfolios for real estate focused relationships and commercial banking. How did you do that?
And then I could mention like software we use.
I'm asking, I'm putting you on the spot. How did you do that?
Okay. A lot of emails, communication,
Okay.
phone calls, but also in like our work tracker software, like I'm the one who kind of quarterbacks the process.
There you go. Okay. Is work tracker the name of the software?
That was fun. It's called Blast.
Okay. Wells Fargo Blast. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
And I actually like the term quarterback. I think that's helpful and useful. So you did all this relationship management via email, via written and oral communication, and through the internal software. And we're just workshopping this right now. We can tailor it and wordsmith it a little more later. And then what were your results? The way that I like to answer this question is to ask myself, to do what? So you did all these things. You coordinated. You were emailing back and forth, and you're using this proprietary software to do something, right? So what did you to do what?
There's two pieces. One's the growth part, and I know we hit like 21% 3 years in a row. But that's so I had that in there, and I'm like, it feels so out of place.
Yeah.
But then the other piece is to like not have attrition of customers.
Okay. So relationship management with email, written, and internal things, resulting in a 21% return for the Grow Park Inn, and a lower attrition rate, a 15% reduced attrition rate for their workforce. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You see the difference in that?
Yeah, I like that.
And that would be one bullet point?
Yep, totally fine. There is a lot of like preconception around like my bullet points need to stay on one line, and I only need to have a certain number and all that kind of stuff. It's style, but it's also you're telling a complex story in one bullet point, right? And so it might take 2 lines in order to do that. There are a couple in my resume that are 3 lines long.
Skills to put like in a bullet. Yeah, I mean, the whole thought, I just thought it was resonated. But like, one of the bullet points be short. Like,
Yeah.
It just feels conflicted.
So 2 things about that. Yes, and so what you're doing is you're telling a complex story for the person reading it and for the software reading it, right? So the software is going to be looking for, leadership skills. They're going to look for software. They're going to be looking for like specific ability, right? So you want to make sure you have that in there, and it's almost better to say more than say nothing. You see what I mean? And not that this says nothing. It's just it doesn't tell the whole story about what it is that you're doing.
And if you follow this, like the interview for the job I currently have was star-based, so like situation, task, action, result.
Mhm.
So this kind of speaks more to that.
It mirrors that, yeah.
Yeah. So
And it helps you interview as well, because you're already thinking in that process.
yeah, that's good. Because they did bring up like each point. They were like, what happened? What was the result?
Yeah.
So
So what about an industry that's not results, super results?
I'd be willing to bet any industry that you have, I can make results oriented.
Yeah.
So what?
I don't know. I'm just thinking like in terms of higher ed, I feel like so much of what we do is this kind of like amorphous,
Mhm.
like we don't have the greatest data. We don't have, we don't really, as much as we talk about outcomes and continuous improvement, we don't necessarily always have an obvious and direct result
Sure.
for something that we've done.
So the way that I would answer that question is, if you wanted to put a metric in it, how many students do you see in here? How many conversations do you have? Like how many meetings are you in? You don't have, that's amorphous, but like that's where it's like approximately more than are helpful in that, right? So if I'm thinking about our student leaders in our office, and I say, our student leaders meet with approximately 200 students a year, that is, I don't have to have a real number, but it gives an idea of scale.
Sure.
So the ability to supervise or to interview 5 people is a very different scale than someone who can interview with 100 people in a week. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're wanting to do like approximately more than, you can find results, even if the result is in order to ensure that the student had a better experience.
So can I throw one at you
Mhm.
from my resume?
Yeah.
Let's see. So leverage resources and key stakeholder relationships effectively for successful event planning and execution.
How many events?
I mean, over the course of 12 years, yeah?
Or,
Or in a year?
10, yeah,
Or-
10 events a year, 20 events a year, 100
Okay.
events a year. Yeah.
Okay. But otherwise, I mean, at least I'm saying what I'm doing it for, right? Like I'm not just leveraging resources and stakeholder relationships. It's
Yeah.
specifically for event planning and execution.
And the other thing is you can be specific about those resources, leveraging human capital, leveraging partnerships on campus. Like you can be more specific inside of those resources, because that's kind of broad. So that helps kind of tell the story a little bit more too.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay, so you said that you can have a couple of lines per bullet. So I have a problem that bounces around a lot.
Okay.
And I have a lot of jobs. And so I don't know how to necessarily do that. Like I've heard only go back 10 years, and if I go back 10 years, I have 12 jobs.
Okay.
So I don't know how to best talk about each one because they're all different. I don't know what your kind of advice is.
So what I would say to that is build them all
Okay.
this way. And then whatever you're using the resume for, pick the 2 or 3 that are the most relevant.
Okay.
Right? So in my history, I've worked in higher education for 13 years, but before that, I was in graduate school, and before that, I worked I was a manager for Blockbuster. I worked at a radio station. I sold cell phones, and I sold cars, right? So when I applied for this job, it was important for me to demonstrate that I had industry experience because of the work that I am doing, and because I need to be able to get in different rooms and be able to build rapport. And at the same time, I don't need to talk about how many cars I sold in a year, or how many cell phones I did, or what my management style was at Blockbuster, because it's not relevant really to the work that I'm doing now, right? So depending on what your roles are, I would build the whole thing and then just copy and paste what you're actually applying to.
So would that look strange though if one job is from 2014 and then the next one then is 2018?
Not necessarily. I think so. If you have holes in your resume, that's definitely something that people are aware of. At the same time, it's not as relevant now as it used to be, because people don't stay in industry for 30 or 40 years. So people do hop around. You're at a point in your life and your career where people bounce.
Yeah, because I was trying to show. I mean, I've had a job consistently, but if I take them out because they're not relevant, then it's going to show that I didn't have a job.
So
I don't know.
another thing that you can do, and depending on what you're applying to, is what I have on my resume at the top, where education is here. What I have on mine is a summary of qualifications. And so my summary of qualifications, it would read 13 years of experience in higher education, 6.5 years of experience working with employers in an education setting. And then I would, because that speaks directly to the job description. And so because I want to stay in higher ed. Now, if I wanted to transition, then I would say 25, way more years than it should be working, right? And then, a professional experience, building relationships. So you can build that accomplishment statement kind of or your summary qualification kind of however you want. And at the same time, being kind of clear, making sure that qualification is for that job that you're looking for.
And a follow up on that, as you mentioned 10 years, I've heard that as well, but my personal journey as an educator starts back in 2006, and I feel like that really ties into everything moving forward.
Mhm.
Should you keep stuff more than 10 years ago if it's relevant, or should you just start getting rid of things?
So that, especially in education, there's a lot more flexibility on the length of resumes, and so I'm okay with keeping it if it goes on a second page. The trick is this is feedback that we get a lot is, should my resume be 1 page? And the thing about the 1-page resume is, if you have 1 page of experience, keep it on a page. If you have 2 pages, if you have a little bit more than 1 page of experience, figure out what's the most relevant. Because if someone is going to take the time to look at your resume and flip it over, make sure that they have something to read. You see what I mean? Make it worth their time for flipping it over. So you can add a lot of things to resume other than work, awards, community service, YPA, presentations, all that stuff. But it gets if you have one experience that's on the second page, it looks like that formatting as opposed to not, wanting to say relevant. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're your hand up. Okay. So you feel good? Can we switch?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I appreciate your help.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's cool. I mean, if y'all are bringing up thoughts, I feel like some reviewer brought that thought up with me, not in the group,
And that's,
So I value that.
that's why we workshop it.
I just had one last question. I wonder if you have any like certifications, other credentials, like your education is highlighted, but it's just where you went to school and where you worked. And I don't know the banking industry, but licenses or things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I had that at the bottom, it dropped off, so I have that saved. But I think that's a good point, and especially like specific to banking, it would make more sense to get that in the supervisor.
Yeah, I think that's true. Having a certification section.
And also your work with YPA, I mean, when they're involved.
Yeah.
So that might be something that your banking relationship either would be interested in.
Oh, they did ask about it, so they are. So that's also good. I'm writing all those down.
Yeah. Awesome. So we have a little bit of time. So do y'all want to rock, paper, scissors for who gets next?
I already know things I
Okay.
want to change.
Well,
Can we do mine quickly just so I can ask a specific question?
go for it. Yeah.
And it goes along with what I said earlier.
Mhm.
I've worked for the same company
Yep.
since I graduated, which is that top one.
Mhm.
And what I am failing to show here is the growth through that time.
Yep.
I just listed my latest role because it's the highest.
Yep.
And I've listed other like random internships, part-time jobs in college, which I do not think contribute as much to my resume as my top item.
Yep.
So, yeah, my question is, do I delete the bottom? Pretty much, yeah, Clemson, state of Georgia, and Clemson again, and then just leave it as my City of Atlanta internship, which I do feel like is relevant to my major was in biosystems engineering.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's relevant, and then use that extra space to like really elaborate and show the growth of my time at Cypress Group.
That would be my thought. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, because this is less relevant to the work that you want to be doing, right? I'm assuming you want to stay in renewables or in environmental protection in some fashion, right? Now, here is the thing. Everything has a caveat, and I promise it's because it's just weird. If you wanted to go and work in higher education, if you wanted to switch careers completely, this is really relevant, right? Your campus experience is really relevant because you've been out of the industry for a while. You see what I mean? And so this is where your headings can be helpful, where you can say higher education experience if you wanted to go back into higher ed or recreation or whatever, right? And then this would go down into professional experience, work experience. You can call it other things. But if you want to stay in the kind of environmental protection, environmental awareness of advocacy work, then this can absolutely go off.
Okay, and then the state of Georgia one, the only reason I haven't deleted that one, even though I was only there for 2 months, is because the guy wrote me a reference, and I usually attach it to my resume. So I want to reference like my experience with him. I just feel I didn't know if that was confusing to have a reference from someone that is not listed on my resume.
So that happens all the time.
Okay.
And this is my guess, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I would be willing to bet you probably have more relevant references now than you do now. And so letter of recommendation.
Yeah, that's the only one I have in writing.
And that's okay. Like, hey, candidly, like that's letters of reference are they're helpful for like if you wanted to go to graduate school, if you wanted to have some other kind of formal training. But if you wanted to change careers or something like that, or change jobs, that's less.
I applied for a job that didn't even ask for, all it asked for was a resume. Like there was not a place to add anything else.
Yeah.
Just
I
that.
usually just like give it to
Blew my mind, but
even though they don't ask for
Don't
it.
tell HR, but a lot of hiring managers say screw it.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's okay to
Just don't tell HR that.
And then I just like kind of half-assed it on my technical skills section, but I feel like it's more relevant than other like community involvement, for example. Like I'm not sure that YPA would be that relevant to energy and renewables. But I kind of went through and deleted about half the technical skills I had listed because I went so basic I was like, yeah, I know how to use Word. So does everybody, you know?
Yes.
So I don't know. Yeah, how do you advise? Like, I don't want to look like I'm just taking the kitchen sink with all that.
The way that I would do it is I would use that to answer the how question. So I would, technical skills to me, anytime I see a skill section on the resume, it sounds like Napoleon Dynamite to me. I have nunchuck skills, I have bow hunting skills, right? And so that is not the way that I would suggest doing it. Because community involvement, especially if you're in environmental or if you're in solar, I mean, hell, you're in an industry that is very reliant on a new generation of people, right? And so having that on your resume is super valid in my mind, right? And so what I would do, you used Google Earth and GIS, right? You probably use that for your watershed internship, I'm guessing?
I still use GIS now. I think that was the most important one that I want to keep.
So what I would do is I would build that in. So using, you know, you did utility scale solar mapping, utilizing GIS and Google Maps, right? Or whatever the Street View or Google Earth. Like that answers the how question. Do you see what I mean?
That's like that. And then so build it into the section and then use that section down there to talk about community involvement.
That would be my suggestion. And again, you have it looking at a resume of who you're applying to, right? So the Chamber of Commerce is going to be very motivated by community experience, right? But whereas a medical practice may or may not, I don't know, because it kind of depends on the practice, probably.
Here in sales, I'm definitely going to want to see what you're talking about.
That's it.
Awesome. That answers these questions. If there's anything else for Larry,
those were, you know, those are kind of pointing the things out. You know, I definitely, this is, you know, certifications is handy. And this is something too, and this is for everyone in the room, as your education, as you're further away from your education, it can move further down on your resume because it's less, like, to use a newspaper term, above the fold, like the most important thing is above the fold. And so your education is wonderful, and at the same time, the further away you are from it, the less relevant it is to the people that you're applying to.
that actually, sorry, brings up one last question. I included my summer in more than for a conversation point, not because I think it adds to my resume. Is that okay, or is that just something?
Totally fine.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, a page is valuable real estate, right? So like at some point, it's probably going to become less relevant. But if you have a really good story to tell, that can go in a cover letter, for example. Like during my time in Finland, I really discovered blah. Like that could be a story in the cover letter.
It's also a really good one to hold because sometimes, like when we're hiring, we like to ask the question, "What's something about you that's not on your resume?"
Yeah.
And so that could be your little
Personal.
back pocket tidbit.
Yeah.
And also the fact that it's sustainable cities.
Right.
I think that that's a really good piece because students don't think about to be sustainable. So I think that would be my question.
Cool. Feeling good?
Quick question. What do you think in general about count or like executive summaries at the top or something like how valuable is that kind of start for that?
So, style. The style answer, which I'm not stylish, I'll get into that right now, I get that. But my style is the summary of qualifications because it's more direct and it speaks more specifically. An executive summary is more of a LinkedIn thing, more of a cover letter thing in my mind. But that's a personal choice, especially because, like I said, a page is valuable real estate, right? So I would encourage you to decide for yourself what is the most valuable use of that.
It's also kind of user
Cool. So I have a little bit more time, but I want to make sure that I'm not keeping folks later than 9:30. So how are we feeling time wise? Okay. There was also the ask of folks who were reviewing resumes as well, like in hiring committees and those kind of things. Do you feel like I'm talking to that, or should I use this as an example to talk to that?
You explaining how to do it was kind of shown both ways. As someone who sees them on the other side.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that I'm meeting your needs as well.
Feel free to use mine as the other perspective if that makes sense.
I think too, like, it's nice to have the language, like the explanation of why when sometimes you look at a resume, it just doesn't feel good. So like that's a very non-specific, subjective way to say like, well, I've got these 4 applicants in front of me. I just don't like this resume is not really the right, when you're on a hiring committee especially, not really the most like succinct or I guess expert way to talk about the resumes you're looking at.
What did you do? What is this? Like that. Cool. All right. So this is a very different type of resume, and you've been doing stuff for a long time. And so I want to kind of use your example to speak kind of broadly. At the same time, again, we're the feedback. Decide how you want to use it. When folks see this resume, what do you think?
There's a lot of words.
I'm not sure what he wants to do.
Oh, I see a typo. I'm a copy editor, so not actually what I do for work, but if anybody wants a copy editor, I do have a side hustle.
We're editing other people's.
It's always harder to edit your own.
I think I have a similar situation, but it's kind of wordy. It's also how I see mine.
Mm-hmm.
But like some of this you could talk about in the interview, or maybe bullet points would help kind of like help the flow of reading. Even though I kind of like the uniqueness of how it is structured.
I do feel like it tells a story in a way that a lot of resumes don't. But as somebody who might be reviewing 21 resumes, that's a hard one to just pick out the like top highlights. Yeah.
So to speak to that point first, when you're looking at resumes, especially professional recruiters, you get about 6 seconds. They want to get into the maybe pile. When they're looking at resumes, they're looking for the things they're looking for, and they're really fast and they're really good at it, looking for what they're looking for. And so what I see to begin with is it's hard to see the things that I would be looking for. Where did you work? What was your title? When were you there? That's where in the other 2 examples, it's called the dual column style. And so what you have is your experience on one side, when you were there on the other side, as your title, as when you were there, and then your experience, your title kind of going underneath. So Fred Anderson, digital content manager. Like I'm able to find that really quickly, looking down the left side of the column, right? The right side of the column tells me how long you were there. So if this person was there for 5 or 15 years, I can see that and see how long and how important it was for them to stay for that long. Does that make sense?
And I think you could fold in some of the skills, like we talked about in both of the other resumes, like into the job description.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a little conversational, which is unique, and I like it, but the interview would also be conversational. So if I just streamline it, you take out some of those words, like where you say, am a highly self-motivated leader, you could just say self-motivated leader.
Just do on your goal, on your 10 years management.
There you go.
So how do you feel about breaking up the words with numbers? Because in the top 2 sections, the word 10 doesn't really stick out. Like 10 should be a number that sticks out. 10 years of experience, 5 years, 5 years, which he does in the experience sections. But I think part of breaking up the wordiness, the top 2 sections would maybe be to use numbers instead of letters there, which he kind of starts to do in skills, but he says both the word 3 and the number 3, which may not be necessary. But
Yes, yes to all of that. And I would pick one. So if it's 40, you have 40 plus teammates, FORTY or 40. Like pick one or the other would be my suggestion whenever you use numbers like that.
So the copy edit rule is 1 through 9 is spelled out. 10 plus is yeah. But I will say, in terms of your point, I do think putting all numbers as numbers might be the way to go.
And
Unless you're applying for a writing job, then follow the rule.
The hard part for mine is it's, most of my career has been about being adaptable. So it's like, trying to like, where do you want to go? I'm a gent, the problem you need to be solved.
sure.
It's the conversation I really want to have with you is, I'm not your standard person.
Right.
But you have to pass through certain filters, and that's not part of that conversation.
And so here is what I would suggest to do some of that. First, we talked about this a little bit, and highly, and then there's also some first person language. So my top 3, and that is implied in your resume because it's yours, right? So I would take all the conversational language out personally because it's implied being yours. And that frees you up to talk about a lot of other things where, in a summary qualifications, you could talk about, promoted 4 times in 6 years, or, it was in 6 different departments because I wanted to, you wanted to learn.
The problem is I'm not really promoting, it's just more like my role is to expand.
Yeah,
As
that's
long as expands, sometimes the salary goes up, and then they're like, just call it that. That's the auto industry, it's very, very vague, a lot of the stuff, it's like, oh, can you do it? Okay, yeah, how long?
And I think, and there's definitely ways to kind of talk about that.
I'm wondering what you think about the skills section. So what I was thinking was that maybe a more definitive statement that says like excels in these skills, and deleting the second sentence that says when you ask friends, families, leaders, coworkers, and connections, they'll vouch for those skills. I feel like it would be a stronger statement to say, these are my skills, and not say like, yeah, you can ask anyone, it's not just me that makes this, it's like being more confident in those skills maybe.
Yes, and so that is one way to do it. That's what your references are for too. So I mean, to be able to speak to that, and again, to go a personal thing. Strong. I'm just going to use a skill of strong written and oral communication skills, right? For me to say I have strong written and oral communication skills doesn't mean anything, right? What I want to be able to do is I want to demonstrate that I have strong written and oral communication skills by having a well-formatted resume that's succinct and tight, that demonstrates clear communication skills, right? And so adaptability, to speak to that for a second, like whenever we break out your experience, we can break it out in a lot of different ways. You were a coach, you were a consultant, you worked in the automotive industry. So like we, just by headings of automotive experience, consulting experience, that's going to show adaptability because those are 2 totally different fields. Even though you might have been consulting in the automotive field, that you're going to be able to show what you want to show by how you word in your resume versus trying to say that you have, bow hunting skills and those kind of things. So.
One more time. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. In this day and age where like remote working is more common, and I have it in my resume too, how relevant are the locations? I put the location of each of my roles, Asheville, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina. Is that like no longer relevant? Is that just taking up space on the page?
So, personal choice. What I would suggest, I like having it personally because it shows that cultural competency. Because if I'm hiring in Asheville, someone who's coming from California may have a different interests or different skill set or different mindset, even though their work was in California, but they've been here. You see what I mean? Yeah. So I would put remote, at, or Asheville, North Carolina, remote, something like that. Yeah.
What if you've done like a job twice? Like I had a graduate assistantship and then I had a summer job in between the 2. Like how do you put that deep wise? Like I just put it total because I was like this and then that just was
So just for clarification, you had a summer job in between the time you did your assistantship and this? Okay. So your assistantship was for a year doing what?
For 2 years, I was in a mentoring program, supervising like students.
And then how long were you in the job?
2 years for graduate school.
Cool. So summer is such a short window of time that you could candidly be doing that at the same time.
Okay.
So one way, there are 2 different ways you could do that. Fall 2020 to spring 2022.
Okay.
fall 2022 to summer 2024. You could do that in your dates with enough like explanation of fall, spring, or January, December. You can kind of talk about it using those kind of modifiers. But you can do it as like a date range, comma, second date range,
Okay.
and that's a way of kind of showing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. How are we feeling? I know I've talked a lot, and I've talked really fast.
That's some good news.
Oh, good.
And you have somewhere to be, don't you? I don't
Well, it's
wanna-
in, but
wanna be
I just have to be
mindful.
down. I just have to be down. So,
Okay, I just want to be mindful of your time
We
too.
appreciate it, and also your offer to let us send things after. I hope you meant that.
Please do. I'm no longer young, according to the YPA, so please allow me to share some.
I do have a question on the hiring side. It's not really related to these resumes, but so have been and will be in the hospitality space where we do hiring on kind of the lower end of the labor force, right?
Yeah.
And so I've seen some, in my opinion, some pretty bad resumes, but I think it's likely that you never have help filling out a resume, like you might not have the right influences. So it's like, you don't really want to punish somebody too much. So I guess the question is like, how do you, if you're looking through a stack of unattractive resumes, like, what do you look for to say, all right, this person could still be a good employee versus like, they obviously put no effort into this, like, really bad.
So the way a lot of the hospitality industry does it is, regardless of who they are, they interview them. And so that's a time-intensive process, and as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to make a decision of where your cutoff is on that time, how much need you have, all of those things. The flip side of that is, I would look a lot at, if you don't have time to do individual interviews, I would look at longevity personally, because if they were available for a year, that is very different than working at Papa's Pizza for 6 months, right? Like, it's a very different, like, they're gonna get a ton of training at Biltmore that they may not have gotten at a restaurant somewhere, even if they were there longer. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So depending on what skill set you're looking for, longevity, I think, is a demonstration, and where they work. So if they are working for reputable organizations and they're just looking for a new opportunity versus, working for one that may not have the same level of name recognition / training that they expect. So that would be my part. Yeah.
Sorry, I have another
No,
question.
please.
I don't know anything about, but I also applied to some federal jobs in the picture. But I know that the federal resume is very different.
Oh my God.
Do you have any guidance on that?
So what I'm going to suggest, there's actually, I have a resource for federal work for USA jobs specifically.
Yeah.
But man alive, is that difficult.
Yes.
And the Forest Service actually, the recruiter through the Forest Service actually offers that as like how to navigate and what to do and that kind of thing. So I would actually prefer to defer to experience and expertise in that way. And so I can share that with you if you want to just drop me and then I can introduce you.
No, that would be great, because I know it's a monster. I tried.
And
didn't
it's,
get anything back.
no, it's so difficult. Yeah, it's almost like it's on purpose.
Yeah.
I think the next question will be our last question. We want to thank you very much, David, for everything. Did anyone have like one final question, a good zinger kind of a thing, or?
I don't know, I just get, well, not that I do it, but like, I've been helping my boyfriend apply for jobs, and the online application process is so frustrating. The fact that you attach your resume and then they want you to rewrite it all, and then they want you to do, like, he had to do video responses to questions, and then he had to do an assessment that took an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your advice on like just persisting and not just being like, this is stupid, I don't even want to apply for this job anymore, because the application process is so frustrating.
So I'm going to give you a little inside baseball. Some of that is intentional because they want to know who actually wants it.
Mm-hmm.
They get a ton of they probably get a ton of applicants, and it sounds like this might be consulting work or some kind of.
Oh, well, this is more engineering.
Okay, yeah. And even in engineering, they probably get a lot of applicants. And part of that process is to weed out candidates who don't really want to be there. They're just throwing the resume out everywhere. And it's also, for a field like engineering, precision, following like structural processes, those kind of things are really important to that field. And so you're demonstrating that you're able to do those things more than just saying that you worked on a project in college that, didn't think. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it
So-
was weird.
It sucks. I fully appreciate how bad that
Yes,
sucks.
part of the assessment was like, what is the synonym to this word? And we were like, what is this, the SAT? This is so weird.
And there are, so the other thing of that too is that there's some legalism in that and also some waspiness in that. And so they're actually, forward-thinking companies are actually taking a lot of that away because of how many barriers it puts in place for folks who may not have had access in the past to that kind of thing. So from an equity standpoint, I really hate it. And at the same time, I have only the control over my own sphere of influence. So I would encourage them just to stay with it, be persistent, and networking is the other thing. Like, the application is great, but if someone is willing to vouch for him on the inside, the application is almost a formality.
Right.
That particular with my industry, it's more about who you know and
Yeah.
that, I mean, like, you can give them a sticky note as your resume. As long as you know, can you sell cars? Can you handle the drama? That's all my people that might think, and they will go on their personal read. They will like literally take your resume, toss it in the trash can, and they'll go on their personal read. Right. But yeah, thank you very much, David.
Absolutely.
Let's give him a good round of applause for everything. Just for our online audience over there, there was David Earnhardt with the Associate Director of Employer Relations over at UNC Asheville. Thank you very much, Kelly, with Western Carolina, for helping us make that connection. I want to thank all of our different sponsors, whether it's the annual ones we've had with Western Carolina, Gillespie Dental, Bit Cookie, Capital Play, Amplified Media, Fast Signs, and Park National Bank. Make sure we thank you all very much for that. And the ones that have made their shots in social media, for particularly Lancaster Law Firm for being our top tier sponsor for our party last month. Also want to kind of give you a little bit of overview of what's coming up for professional development. We're going to do our best to apply more or less term we're using as a content cycle. We're going to try to do one practical tip event, followed by one self-awareness growth event, and also not necessarily follow, but also do a Failure Friday event where we can learn from mentors or folks that have started businesses or had longer careers, or what was their failure, what did they learn from overcoming a failure or a struggle or an embarrassment. So we're hoping next month to have a Failure Friday event, and then have one on a personality profile to be able to help you grow personally in your self-awareness. One of the simpler paths to becoming a great leader is your self-awareness or humbleness. Some people would call those the same things. We have coming up on the 21st, we have a joint opportunity here with the Chamber. It's going to be hosted here at the Chamber of Commerce on July 24th, starting at 8 o'clock, from 8 to 10. It's going to be the morning networking. I believe that's a members-only event with that. So just make sure you you do take advantage of the opportunity to go ahead and join as a YPA member. We do have a new forum, and it does go for the entire year, a calendar year from the time that you sign up. So there's no more apply it December and it only lasts till June. We're going to be doing it for a full calendar year. We just had one of our Bounty and Soul partnership events yesterday. So we hope that went well, but we also have a couple more that y'all can sign up for online or through the RSVP stuffs by following Christy's wonderful newsletter. But we have an event coming out Friday, the 22nd, so the day after the morning networking. We have one where we're doing the Friday market. That's over here at the Buy Low in Black Mountain. Then the third event is going to be Wednesday, July 27th. It's at the Living Web Farms in Bills River. Also, save the day. I think it's this coming a week from this Saturday, a week from tomorrow. We have a kickball event. I guess we're still looking for the location on it. We'll be announcing on social media as soon as possible. But we do have that coming up. So get your shoes tied up, get some water, maybe bring an oxygen tank along, and we'll try to have those things in there. So just please watch social media for those different things. We'll try to post some snippets from this event, whether it's photos or short videos for just practical tips, highlighting what David so very gracefully shared with us. But thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in our next event soon.
Awesome. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I really appreciate it. It makes these kind of conversations really fun. There are some handouts up here if you're